Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I appreciate it a lot. I also love it when people leave comments, so if you have a suggestion or a question about the video or want to tell me how you do things or just to say hi, those are all great things to leave in the comment section, so thanks for that in advance. So I realized I haven't done anything with an Ammonite shell for a while, so I thought I would do a fossil ammonite today. A long time ago on the channel, when I was pretty new to this, I did an Ammonite shell fossil that I kind of made into an actual stylized rendition of what a real ammonite looks like, or looked like, I should say, since they're extinct. And that, if you want to see that one, that's kind of a cool piece, I think. It's one of my faves I ever made. But I'm going to make something a little more simple and just kind of show off the fossil itself on this one. And I'm going to put a little green tourmaline above it to give it a little more color, because the fossil itself is kind of yellows and browns and tans, so it's kind of muted. But very pretty in the pattern. I really like it. So I think it'll be a nice, simple, kind of probably a beginner-ish piece. Ammonites first show up in the fossil record about 410 million years ago, and they seem to have been gone extinct at the same asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs in about 66 million years ago. So they were around for a long time. Their most closely related ancestors today are octopuses and squids and other cephalopods like that. They're distantly related to nautiluses, I believe, and they look similar, although their shells were usually bumpy. But I've always been interested in fossils, and I think this will make kind of a pretty piece, so let's make it. Before we do that, though, I need to thank some people. First, I want to thank my patrons over on Patreon. They're kind of my core group of supporters. They provide me financial support as well as a cool environment that they've created over there with a lot of artistic, smart people who we can all kind of exchange ideas with. It's fun. And I do appreciate their support very much. I have a new one, Amelia O. Thank you for signing up. I think you'll find that that's a great group of people over there once you get to know them. So thanks for that. Thank you also to my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 20,800, which is awesome. Thank you for that. I love the comments that some people leave. It's nice when I find out that I've helped someone in some way, because everybody likes to feel like they're helping someone out. So in addition to being something I love to do, it's nice to know somebody else is getting something from it. So thanks for that. And thank you for the contributions, like the Buy Me a Coffees and the Super Thanks. Those things really help a lot with the cost of materials right now. All right, well, let's get started on this project. So this is one of my design ideas sketchbooks that you can get on my merch store. The more recent ones have some useful charts and information on the backs of the various varieties. This one has wire gauge to inches to millimeter conversion charts, which I find pretty useful, and I think a lot of people overseas have told me that that's a useful thing, since they don't use wire gauges like that so much. The thing I really like about them, though, is this grid pattern in the background on the pages. That allows me to draw things up a little more symmetrically, because that is not a natural talent that I have. It's nice because you also have a record of what you made in the past, and that's kind of nice if you want to go back and figure out what you did. So, okay, so I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to do kind of a relatively simple ammonite pattern. I have these nice calcified ammonite slices. On the back, they're pretty too. And sometimes I'll do these with an open back, but on this one I think I'm going to close it in and do the front facing forward here. They're flat on the top, so we're going to have to get the bezel to be just barely above that, and we're going to have to be a little gentle when we go to set it, as calcified ones are a little more delicate than some types of fossils. And I decided, like I said, because this one is a little bit earth tony, I'd find something that was add a little color but still be kind of in that color range here. Let me see if I can get it so you can see the color in it better. It's a really pretty kind of rich green tourmaline cabochon. It's about 5 millimeters. And I pre-made a bezel for this in advance to save a little time. We'll focus mostly on this stuff down here. I also made a bail, but we'll assemble it all after we make the setting for this part, and we'll call it good. So I think that'll just give it a little pizzazz with a little green in there. Here's the materials I'm using for the bezel. I'm using 26 gauge 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip. That's 4.76 by 0.41 millimeters. And it's pretty tall, so we'll file it down to whatever we need to. Part of this is pretty deep. When we do set this in a closed back, then we're going to have to do some creative backing to make it fit in there nicely and flat, because we have some different depths here. So we'll cut some custom pieces of the kind of cardboard that I use that's good for backing stuff. So the bezel for this is also out of 26 gauge. The back of the piece, I'm going to use 26 gauge sheet, which is again 0.41 millimeters. The step I created so that this has an open back on this bezel, I used a bit of 18 gauge round wire and just filed it flat after I made that step. That'll allow a little light to get to the back of the stone and make it a little glowy. This is low dome half round number 4, I believe, from Rio Grande, and I tapered it on both sides and bent it into a little bail. I'm probably going to use 16 or 18 gauge wire. That would be 1.3 or 1.6. No, let me get that right. That's not right. You think you have them memorized and then you don't. 18 gauge is about 1 millimeter, 1.02 I think, and 16 gauge round is 1.3. So yeah, I had one of them wrong. Alright, so let's get started making a bezel for this ammonite. I think it might be easiest if we did it with it facing down like that. So let me grab my bezel material. So I think I'm gonna start it kind of in somewhere down this long curve here. I don't want to start it in the corner because it'll never be just quite right there if I do that. So we'll make a sharp bend kind of a little ways in here with the pair of pliers. Make sure to get it straight up and down. So now I can kind of get a feel for where it needs to start bending. And sometimes if I need to, when I'm bending something that's abstractly shaped like this, kind of use my marker to kind of help me remember where to bend it. We'll see how close we get on the way. That's not too bad. If you ever need to move a bend a little bit, if you grab it a little bit offset like that and pinch, kind of slide it along the length of the piece a little bit. That gets me a little bit closer in there, but I still need to curve it a little more. Okay, now we got it wrapped around there. Let's make a little mark right here. You can brace this against something if you need to, or use your miter vise jig if you have one of those. So when I do a bezel, I usually make sure that the two ends are kind of pointing straight at each other. And in this case, normally I'd make it into a rectangle or a square because it just makes it easier to solder, but I want to keep the general shape of this one since it's weird. So I'm going to flux it and then put a little bit of this hard silver sheet solder. Incidentally, if you've never been to my channel, that's what I use primarily, and it looks like that. I use a liquid flux called Mighty Flux most of the time, at least currently. And I dribble it on with a dropper bottle. My torch is a Silversmith model. It's a settling air torch, and it draws in atmospheric air through the hole here. So it's only got one tank, just the acetylene tank, and it mixes the atmospheric air in with the gas to make it burn hotter. It's not as hot as a oxyacetylene torch, but it's hotter than a propane torch, so I like it. It's pretty good for silver. Okay, got that fluxed. Let's put a little piece of solder on there. The only thing that usually goes wrong with bezels when you're soldering them is if you get one side up to the soldering temperature before you get the other side, solder will jump to that side because it's hot enough to melt it. And so you want them to both reach temperature at about the same time. That's why we kind of heat it this way. Even then, sometimes I still do that. So it's one of those things that occasionally happens, but the more evenly you can heat things, the less likely it is to happen. Okay, so let's kind of reshape this a little bit. So I haven't decided on this whether I'm going to put a border around this or whether I'm gonna, I think I might, like some, I don't know, some 14 gauge round or something like that, or should I do square? I don't know, or maybe 16 gauge. All these decisions, I tell you. You gotta be careful not to break this stone by forcing it somewhere where it doesn't want to go. That's pretty close on size. I think we did all right. I think it's just about right though. I just didn't have it bent quite right, so we'll make sure that we're very, very careful when we set that. And I'm going to make a mark. This is something I've done before. I'm going to make a mark on the bottom here so I don't accidentally solder it down on this side like that, because then the ammonite won't fit. That would be very much a Chad thing to do. So, like I said, I'm going to use kind of thin sheet for the back of this. And the reason I can do that is because, well, number one, with a big thing like this, you don't want it to be too heavy. I'm going to have all these silver balls going around it, so that's going to add some weight. But also, when you put a border on it, or even just adding these balls on here next to the bezel, will kind of reinforce the stiffness of the whole thing and give it some strength. But one thing we need to consider is when we're cutting this, we need to cut a piece of sheet that's big enough to have room to do that stuff that I wanted to do around it. So I'm going to have to kind of estimate that. You know, it certainly needs to be, you know, probably about that wide. So let's do that. And then in order to make sure we have plenty of room, let's cut a piece about right there. If you're new to this, I don't know if I would do something with a weird shape like this, you know, until you have a few bezels under your belt. I think I have plenty of solder there probably, so let's get this fluxed. Kind of excited. My friend is taking me out rock hounding this weekend, which is good. I haven't been in a long time. So one thing, if you have trouble getting your solder to stick in place where you want it to be, when the flux it goes through kind of a gooey stage when you're heating it. And so you can kind of use it to stick your solder in place. One thing when you're a beginner at this, there's quite a bit of surface area on the sheet here, and you need to get both the bezel and the sheet up to 1450 degrees, which is the flow point of hard silver solder. And so this bezel up top here is really exposed to the flame and gets up to that temperature pretty easily. The sheet below it is much bigger and spread out, and so it takes a little bit more work to get that up there. So oftentimes people overheat their bezel before they get that bottom sheet in place. Now, some ways you can get around that: you lift it up and heat from the bottom until your solder starts to flow. You can also use one of those tripods with a screen a lot of people have. But you see, if you get it hot enough, the solder will start to flow, and then you can avoid putting the direct flame right on your bezel so much. And then you get a nice seam all the way around without overheating your bezel. You can also just bob around really rapidly and kind of avoid the bezel, and that works too. So I like doing fossil pieces because I've always been kind of a science buff. And fossils are interesting. It's fun to look for fossils too. You can find ammonites near where I live. They're not as well formed as these ones, but there's an outcrop of what's called a Pierre shale. You can find baculites and ammonites and what are they called? Bivalves and other stuff. Actually found the fossilized center of a sea anemone one time, not too far from here. Some of the lake beds and reservoirs around here have fossils in them. Our next step, I think, we need to make some balls. So I want them to, we'll start small and work our way up. How about that? So I'm just going to find some scrap and then we'll start making balls on a charcoal block. You can make graduated balls if you just kind of start small and, you know, increase the size as you go. Let's see how those come out, and then we can fill in gaps as we need to. Woo. Runaway ball. I feel like I might be making balls for a little while, so probably not going to make you watch me do them all. No one really wants to run away in that corner. So we're going to start with the small one right there. It's going to be further up here somewhere because it had two of them balled together. So, but that's basically what I'm going to do all the way around here. And if I don't want them to get too huge by the time I get around here, I may do them in like sets of three, like three this length, and then three the next length, and then three the next length, and we'll kind of space them out so it looks like it gradually gets bigger. Because if I do them each one slightly bigger, it's going to be pretty big by the time I get up there. And I don't know if I can make the subtle differences that I need. So I will make a bunch of balls and we'll figure out which ones look best. So one thing I would note that when you're doing this many little tiny balls and you're trying to place them on there to see how many you need, every once in a while you're going to bump things and they all go rolling around. So I think what I'm going to do is we'll start right here with the smallest ones and just work our way up. I have a whole bunch made. I think I'll need to make a few more to get to the end, but I think if we solder them and then move on, solder them, move on, move, you know, that way, you know, maybe 3 or 4 at a time, that'll be the best way to go. So I'm going to dribble a little flux right here. And see if I can find the smallest one here. That's probably the smallest one. One of the things that happens is when you heat this flux, the balls will have a tendency to roll around a little bit. So we're going to try and do it kind of gradually. That way there's less chance of them going too far away. I can kind of push them into place while it's in that kind of gooey stage. So those, I got 5 of them in a row there. Kind of hard to see, but I'm going to cut some little dinky bits of solder. So those, I got 5 of them in a row there. Kind of hard to see, but I'm going to cut some little dinky bits of solder. The tricky part about doing little tiny balls like this is the little ball gets up to the soldering temperature very easily because it's tiny. And you got to get the rest of the entire piece up to that 1450 as well, and that takes a lot more work. And so people have a tendency to, you know, the solder will flow onto the ball and it looks like it's stuck, but it didn't really stick because the piece on the bottom hadn't reached that temperature. So, I know this sounds a little weird, but when you're done, you want to make sure to pick your balls really hard. And by that I mean trying to pry them off of there. So, one thing you could do probably if you wanted to is pre-melt some solder all the way around and kind of sweat it on there. But I'm going to do what's called pick soldering, where I pick it up and touch it there once I think it's about the right temperature. If you're interested in finding out about that, I have a pretty good video about it. I think it's one of those skills that's really worth learning. Let's pick up a little bit here. I'm actually just going to kind of avoid the balls. Oops, I knocked that off. When I start seeing other solder flowing, you know I'm pretty much there. So. I think I got that one. You could also just lean the solder up against the side of them if you don't know how to pick solder yet. Okay, just so you can see that thick soldering isn't the only way to do it. Just lay a couple of pieces of solder. I decided I was getting too many mid-sized ones in here, so I wanted it to start tapering up bigger, so we'll fill out the rest with bigger ones after this. Time to make some more balls. Right now this looks like an ear. Not really what I was shooting for, but you know. Let's pull this off and take a peek at it. There's quite a bit of flux on here, so it'll be easier to tell for sure. Towards the end here. Once it's cleaned up a bit. I'm going to add a little bit more solder on the last one. Just for fun. Okay, I'm going to let that pickle for a few minutes. Hopefully it'll clean up a bit and we can take a peek at it. So I did some thinking off camera, and I do kind of like that. So I'm going to do that, I think, and what I'll do then is I'll cut a straight one and I'll file this so it kind of tapers right in there. And then we'll have a complete frame around it. So let me get this one soldered down. I'm going to flux it, and then I'm going to lay some pieces of solder on the outside edge. You're that way, are you? Okay. So I'm going to try and shape this so it fits in there nicely. Soldered down, I think we can trim this off, probably. Corner down a little bit so whoever even ends up wearing this doesn't stab themselves to death. Don't want to kill your customers. We need to figure out where to solder this. I think I'm going to have to hang just with a slight angle like that, maybe. So about right there, I like that spot. So it'll take a lot longer to get that piece up to temperature than it will this piece. So. A little better. I'll use a pretty big piece of solder there, because I'm going to use the same piece of solder that I closed this up with as the thing that I attach it to this little bezel up here with. The thing about stuff like this is it doesn't want to always stay there, it always bounces back a little bit. So in order to get those touching, you have to kind of torque them out of. Kind of bend them inwards like that so they're touching. Now we should be able to just pick solder that close. And then we'll let it pickle for a while. And I'll fix my wife some dinner. I think that came out nice. Let's see how it pickles up. What I did was I used a little bit of tag board under here. There's none under this section. There's one that goes from about there to there, and then I put another little piece on top to compensate for the under part of the shell here where it's thinnest. The only other thing I did was I filed this a little bit thinner at the top because it's kind of a sharp point. And I think I'm going to start right there and kind of gently, I do this a little different than some. I use the side of my chain nose pliers as a bezel pusher. I'm just going to kind of gently push that over the corner. Okay, last step is burnishing, and I'm going to use the rounded outer part of this. And I'm going to go at it at kind of a steep angle on this. So I really want to kind of push that down over the top. Okay, there's a little ammonite pendant. You could oxidize it if you wanted to kind of bring out the various recessed areas and stuff. So last thing I'll do is I'll clean up the tops of the bezels a little bit with a fine silicone abrasive polishing wheel. So I'll get this finished up and then put it on a chain and we'll take some pictures. So tell me what you might have done different. Or how you set ammonites. I'm always curious how other people do it. Okay, well that was the ammonite pendant with the tourmaline on top. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you go. And I'd love it if you check out my main YouTube channel page. I checked the other day and I have 480 some videos now. And that is a lot of content, and there's almost certainly some other stuff you'll find interesting or useful over there. There's a playlist page too if you want to help kind of sort through it a little bit. But yeah, check out some other videos. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. And don't forget to hit the video description down below. There's some important links there. There's a link to my merch store where you can get those nice design idea books where you can keep track of your projects in. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that community. It's a really cool place and all different tiers of membership you can check out. And there's a link to get my newest ebook, which is the tutorial guide for 2024's videos, of which there were 170 plus. So those are ebooks. You can download them. They have extra information about each video, including pictures and a materials list and a difficulty rating, notes I made about the project, including whether I would do it differently or whether the things I ran into that were troublesome or easy or whatever. So lots of information. I'll link right to each video, and it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a super nice way to support my channel. So get yourself one of those. There's also one for 2023 there if you're interested as well, and you can get them as a combo pack too for a little bit off. I think it's $5 off of what would normally be. Yeah, normally be 70 for the two because they're 35 a piece, and it's 65 if we get them both at the same time. So check those out. Thanks for coming to my channel. Take care. Happy silversmithing.